Good evening. I would like to call to order the January 26th, 2026 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that all board members are present. The board values public participation and engagement in the meetings of the board. Board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the LWSD website and are available for viewing following the conclusion of the board meeting as well. The public are always welcome to email the board at boardmembers@lwsd.org. Director Meekhoff, would you like to read our land acknowledgement tonight?
The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District acknowledges that our district is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights on this land, including the Duwamish and the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. We commit to continue collaborating with our Native community to teach the indigenous history of this land and these local tribes to all children of the district. We also commit to provide the best possible education for all children of Native descent who attend our schools.
Thank you. I will now entertain a motion to approve the January 26th, 2026 agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Yoakum to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next on the agenda, we've got a couple of recognitions this evening. Director Richter, are you reading the proclamation for Career and Technical Education Month?
Proclamation, whereas Career and Technical Education offers students the opportunity to gain the academic, technical, and employability skills necessary for true career readiness, and whereas students in career and technical education programs participate in authentic, meaningful experiences that improve the quality of their education and increase student engagement and achievement, and whereas career and technical education provides students with career exploration opportunities earlier in their educational experience, which enables them to make informed and beneficial decisions about their academic coursework, as well as pursuit of established programs of study and career pathways. And whereas leaders from business and industry nationwide report increasing challenges related to the skills gap and connecting qualified professionals with available careers in critical and growing CTE-related fields, including healthcare, energy, advanced manufacturing, and information technology. And whereas career and technical education prepares students for these and other fulfilling careers by offering integrated programs of study that link secondary and post-secondary education and lead to the attainment of industry-recognized credentials. And whereas ensuring that employers have access to a qualified workforce is a crucial step in ensuring productivity among the business and industry communities, as well as continued American economic growth and global competitiveness. And whereas Lake Washington School District has approximately 16,373 students participating in 106 different career and technical education course options taught by 151 career and technical education teachers. Therefore, the Board of Directors do hereby proclaim February 1st through 28th, 2026 as Career and Technical Education Month.
Thank you, Director Richter. And Director Yoakum, you've got a proclamation for National School Counseling Week.
Yes. Proclamation, whereas Lake Washington School District's 100-plus school counselors help students reach their full potential, and whereas school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development. And whereas school counselors help parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children. And whereas school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves. And whereas school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. And whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school. Therefore, the Board of Directors do hereby proclaim February 2nd through 6th, 2026 as National School Counseling Week in Lake Washington School District.
Thank you, Director Yocum. The next item on the agenda will be public comment. The Board of Directors of Lake Washington School District welcomes the public to the business meetings of the board and encourages community engagement. The board dedicates 30 minutes to hear from the public during the public comment period of the meeting, with each individual provided up to 2 minutes to speak. Participants should not expect a response from the board at the end of their comments, as we dedicate this time to listening to your voice and would like to get as many members of the public an opportunity to speak as the time allows. If you have materials you would like distributed to the board, please leave them in the basket next to the podium. Each speaker will be called to the podium in the order of sign up. A timer will appear on the screen showing your remaining time. When you have 30 seconds left, the timer will turn yellow to let you know you're nearing the end. When 10 seconds remain, the timer will turn red as a signal to wrap up your remarks. Please note that the microphone will be turned off shortly after your time expires, so we ask all speakers to conclude when their time is complete. I'd like to also remind everyone here this evening that this opportunity to engage in dialogue is also an opportunity to model respectful discourse to our students and our community. We ask that the audience refrain from commenting and from prolonged applause following each comment, as it takes up time and prevents us from listening to as many speakers as we can fit into our dedicated 30 minutes. Once the public comment portion of our business meeting concludes, we ask that everyone who is not interested in listening to the rest of the agenda items exit quietly and in an orderly fashion so that we can continue the rest of the meeting. Members of the public can sign up to participate on the district website. Sign up closes at noon on the day of the board meeting, and comments will be offered in the order of sign up. Speakers can designate another person to speak in their place in advance of the noon deadline, but speaker substitutions at the meeting unfortunately cannot be accommodated. As a reminder, the board does not discuss personnel matters at board meetings. Members of the community are encouraged to attempt to resolve issues with teachers, school principals, or other district personnel before bringing issues to the board. Additionally, speakers should refrain from naming students unless they are the parent or guardian of said student. Public comment will now begin at 7:07 p.m. The first speaker is Maria Hansen. Maria Hansen, sorry.
Would it be okay if he goes underneath and hands this to you so you can see what I'm going to be speaking about up closely? Good evening. At the start of the school year, my 3 children, all in elementary school, expressed frustration with the use of the black and white photocopied worksheets instead of math workbooks, what you guys are looking at now. The copied workbooks often fall apart, as you can see, and more importantly, many math problems rely on color cues that are lost in these black and white copies. An administrator shared with me that approximately 30% of these copies are essentially meaningless without additional teacher explanation. After hearing about this repeatedly, I started asking and learned that funding for elementary math workbooks has been cut across the entire district. Teachers were just left to implement the math curriculum without proper materials and were simply told to make copies. I have spoken to several teachers, and they are equally frustrated. They are spending too much time making copies and clarifying assignments instead of teaching. Teachers have voiced their concerns and have been ignored. Students are frustrated and are beginning to have negative associations towards math. Parents, many of whom were unaware of this decision, feel blindsided. I am disappointed that the district failed to anticipate the burden this decision would place on students and teachers. While some PTSAs have been able to step in and fund math workbooks for their schools, others cannot. Furthermore, creating inequities within the same district. I have heard members of this board speak about the commitment to equity, and I struggle to understand how cutting funding for essential math resources aligns with that mission. How does shifting the responsibility to parent-funded organizations support equitable outcomes for students? And how does introducing unnecessary frustration for teachers and young students support emotional learning in our classrooms? The district does a disservice to both students and educators when it cuts funding for core instructional materials that teachers need to do their jobs. I will end with this. A few months ago, Dr. Holman shared an enrollment update highlighting declining enrollment across the district.
If you could wrap up, please. If you could wrap up your comment, please.
I will. 10 more seconds. Prioritize instructional programs and materials that directly affect the quality of our students' education so that families want to send their children to our...
Please wrap up your comment.
I hope the district and the board will listen more closely to parents and students, and especially our teachers, who best understand...
Please wrap up your comment.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Sean McLaughlin. Is Sean here? Then we'll move on to Michael Fiesel.
Hello, I am Michael Fiesel, and I am a 4th grader at Ellicott Elementary. I am here to discuss the topic of math workbooks. The photocopied pages we use as workbooks are terrible because they have pages that fall out and are not in color. Students in my class have the problem that their math workbooks have missing pages, and our teacher has had to print out the pages, which takes time away from learning classwork. And the workbooks are so flimsy that they have broken in class. Also, our workbooks have no color, which means they sometimes have black or white blotches on them, which makes it impossible to read some instructions. For activities where you must go off color to do it, they are impossible, and we have to mark the things like red or green. I think our school system would be better if we had real math workbooks again.
Thank you. This concludes public comment. Thank you to those that participated and attended to engage with the board. As we move forward with the meeting, if you decide to remain at our meeting, we ask that all attendees are respectful and honor standard meeting protocols, keeping side conversations to a minimum, and voices at the lowest level possible is expected of all attendees. If you decide to leave at this time, please do so in an orderly and quiet manner so the board can continue their business meeting. Again, thank you for coming and participating in the meeting this evening. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the January 26th, 2026 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Yocum and seconded by Director LaLiberty. Superintendent Holman, will you please poll the board?
I will. Director Yocum,
Yes.
Director Richter,
Yes.
Director Meekoff,
Yes.
Vice President LaLiberty,
Yes.
and President Guthrie.
Yes, motion carries. Superintendent Holman, will you please review the donations?
Yes, in your packet tonight, you have over $140,000 in donations from PTSA's boosters in the foundation. So just a huge thank you to Audubon, McAuliffe, Eastlake High School and Lake Washington High School PTSAs, Eastlake High School Booster, Lake Washington High School Robotics Booster, and our partners at the foundation. Thank you for your generous donations.
Thank you. Dr. Holman, do you or staff have a legislative update?
Yes, tonight Associate Superintendent Posthumus will provide a brief update, knowing that the legislative session is in full throes. It's a short session, and so we know any action on any one thing has to occur rapidly. So, Barbara?
Yes, and as a reminder for those who might be pulling up the presentation from home, we add to each legislative update. So this is the last 3 slides for the update this board meeting. So the session began 2 weeks ago on January 12th. And because it's a short session, we are already approaching the policy committee cutoff next week on February 4th, and the fiscal committee cutoff on February 9th. Bills that do not advance will be considered dead. We've testified, again, district staff, board members have testified or signed in on 12 bills so far, with 9 more planned this week. Director Yoakum mentioned at the last board meeting, we're one of the few school districts that are participating in the OSPI fiscal note process. This is important because OSPI sends to a select group of districts to ask us if there is a fiscal impact on the bills that our legislators are proposing. And because we continue to emphasize no unfunded mandates, it's really important that we provide that information. We've received requests on 23 bills so far, and we've responded to 20 with a couple more pending. Just some overview. As with any short session, the legislature tries to propose low or no cost policies. Some examples include curriculum ideas, including celebrating National Voter Registration Day and a standardized process for waiving PE requirements. High school and beyond plan proposal to include a financial aid application requirement. Again, proposals like these are well-intentioned, but even low-cost bills have a workload impact for districts. So this is part of why the fiscal note process matters, to flag all the areas that impact staff. The other thing legislators are doing is putting out ideas to save money for both districts and the state. One example is a proposal to allow school boards to waive certain items from state compliance, and cost savings would be passed to schools. Another idea which saves money from the state is extending the bus depreciation schedule from 13 to 15 years. So the reason it saves money on a statewide basis is it reduces funds to districts. So it would reduce funds by about $140,000 a year to the district, which is basically the cost of one bus. So if the intent is to help us get newer, more efficient buses, this is the opposite of that. The other thing is our legislature reckons with kind of the number of increases in the number of schools across the state that are in binding conditions. They're proposing multiple bills, putting requirements in on minimum fund balance and even maximum fund balance. OSPI is also very interested in required budget education for board members. And finally, just other bills we've been watching. There is a SEB expansion bill. This bill expands SEB, and SEB is our school and benefits board for school employees. And it expands benefits for substitutes. And again, we all agree that healthcare is important for everyone. Many of our substitutes have coverage elsewhere, yet the state requires districts to pay even when substitutes waive coverage. This bill would add $1.3 to $1.6 million in new costs to our district, and that's similar to districts across the state, which means other programs and services for students would be reduced. So we have testified on both the House and Senate versions. Marissa Rathbone, who is the WASA-WASBO Director of Government Relations, and I met with Rep. Berquist, who's from Renton area, and the Healthcare Authority representative or staff to educate them on district practice and costs. We are also, the front funding bill passed the House a week ago. We hope to see it scheduled in the Senate Education Committee as soon as they finish work on the Senate bills. And then there have been a few bills proposed to fix the retail sales tax issue, though none are scheduled for hearings. So we're watching for those to be scheduled. So that concludes my update.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a facility update. Dr. Holman.
Yes, so as I shared with the board previously, we had a few questions come forward related to our 2024 construction levy, and so tonight we have both Associate Superintendent Posthumus and Executive Director Buck here to share a facility update, because we have a lot of things going on to provide some timing related to projects, but also to talk about some opportunities for refinancing of bonds, the highly likely need to use LGO bonds with our current, some of our current projects, and so it's a relatively robust facility update tonight. And so I'll hand it over to the team.
And Executive Director Buck is going to go first, and then I will conclude. So go ahead, Brian.
All right, thank you. Happy to be here tonight. This slide, just wanted to touch on this slide. This is actually taken on January 20th at 6 a.m. I had no idea the northern lights were out, but our project manager was out there, and she took this photo. So we're going to talk about our 6-year construction levy, our 2022 construction levy, our 2024 construction levy, and then touch on our 4-year capital facilities levy. The picture here is at the topping out ceremony that happened in December at Rockwell Elementary School. So the projects in the 2022 construction levy are the rebuild and enlarge of Rockwell Elementary School. I'll jump to this one here. So it includes our middle school additions, which were completed. Finn Hill Middle School, Redmond Middle School, Kirkland Middle School, and those were completed in 2024. It includes our Eastlake High School addition, the rebuild and enlarge of Norman Rockwell, our Redmond High School addition, and our Emerson High School rebuild and enlarge project. So the middle school additions, like I said, Finn Hill Middle School on the left is a picture of the addition. In the middle, Kirkland Middle School addition, which is a modular addition, is one of their lab classrooms. And on the right is Redmond Middle School addition, which created a courtyard between the existing school and the addition. Again, these were completed and occupied in 2024. The Eastlake High School addition is currently under construction. The rendering on the left is the north wing addition. It's kind of looking southwest. And on the right is the actual construction of that same south wing, except, north wing that's looking west. This is under construction, and occupancy is scheduled to be complete and ready for 2026 in the fall. The Rockwell Elementary School Rebuild and Enlarge project is under construction now. Again, the topping off ceremony we had, and the pictures there is that topping off ceremony in December. Next up is the occupancy in the fall. Demolition of the existing building will happen over the summer. And then the parking lots and playground and associated site work will continue until the winter of 2026. This is the Redmond High School addition, and we're kind of between permitting and construction. We have our demolition permitting, and the building permit is scheduled to arrive here early spring. The rendering on the left is looking from the library through the courtyard, with the connection of the new admin and classrooms on the left, with the sky bridge over to the existing commons on the right. And then the actual construction photo on the top right is the same view with the demolition that was completed over the winter on the left. The Emerson High School and K-12, we call it the Emerson Campus Rebuild and Enlarge project, is in the design and permitting process. The rendering on the left is really looking south, coming from the existing parking lot or where the existing school is. The site layout on the right, you can see the new Emerson High School will sit essentially where the field is located. We've done quite a bit of work to save as many mature trees on that site. It's a beautiful site. The gym that's there to the left is the existing gymnasium, and that will remain along with North Star and the parking lot to the north. And then just up to the northwest corner, you can see the new field, which will have some garden beds and a play area. Okay, so this levy provided $295 million in funds. We've received $114 million to date, and the remaining collection of $180 million will be collected through the year 2028. We've also collected over $26 million in impact fees for the last 5 years, and a little over $4 million in interest earnings, which will eventually provide $325 million for capital projects. There's currently $306.2 million allocated for the projects, including dollars set aside for property, program contingency, and construction escalation. And to date, we've spent $122 million. All right, so the next is the 2024 six-year construction levy. This levy will start collecting in 2026 and collect through the year 2031. The projects include the Alcott Elementary rebuild and enlarge project, the upgrade of the field house and community pool at Juanita, the Kamiakin Middle School rebuild and enlarge, the Evergreen Middle School rebuild and enlarge, and the Smith Elementary rebuild and enlarge project. So we were able to fund some pre-design activities, which were able to provide us with 50% schematic design renderings, and also allowed us to have a better idea of cost. So we were able to limit in this levy the amount of contingency needed. The Alcott Elementary project permitting is in progress, and it's scheduled to open in 2027. You can see on the left the Alcott Elementary rendering, and then to the right you can see the 50% schematic layout, which essentially puts the field in what is the southeast corner of the site. The field house and community pool project on Juanita is in pre-design. The images here include on the top left the entry to what is the field house gymnasium, and that's really there and a little to the left, which you can't see, where we will have a north addition, which will include a entryway and lobby for both the pool and the field house. And then the pictures in the middle and to the right show some of the pool project that happened last summer, where we actually drained the pool and refinished the actual guts of the pool and the finishes of the pool. So it's a before and after. This project is scheduled to be completed by fall 2028. The Kamiakin Middle School rebuild and enlarge project is in pre-design. Our design builder is Leach Crusher Lewis, and in combination with Methuen Architects. The renderings to the left you can kind of see, and then the layout is to the right. The new building would be in the northwest corner of the site, which is essentially where the field is now. And this project is scheduled to open in 2029. The Evergreen Middle School rebuild and enlarge project is currently in pre-design. Again, this is Leach Crutcher Lewis and Methuen as our design builder. We're scheduled to kick off in 2027 with planned opening in 2031. The rendering is to the left, and you can see on the top right the site layout, which in essence, the new building is in the current parking lot, and then it bends around and connects to some of the existing Evergreen facility, which is primarily the gym and commons area. The Smith Elementary rebuild and enlarge project is in pre-design and scheduled to open in 2031. The 50% schematic design was designed as a kit of parts similar to Alcott Elementary School, and that's renderings on the left. And then the bird's eye view really kind of shows you on the right how that lays out on the site. So the levy approved by voters in November 2024, like I mentioned, collection doesn't begin until the spring of 2026 and comes to the district over 6 years. We've spent that $6 million to date, which includes pre-design, which was funded prior to the levy. And like I mentioned, the pre-designing of these projects ahead of time gave us some cost certainty, or not certainty, but cost estimates, which allowed us to reduce some of the contingency needed to be built into the levy. All right, moving on to the 2022 facilities levy. This map here is kind of the completed projects. It's on our website. We publish on our website and update it annually. So for the building systems and improvements, this category of improvements is really our life cycle upgrade of our assets throughout all of our building inventory. It includes things like HVAC upgrades, flooring upgrades, some sustainability upgrades as well. Pictured in the top left is a new HVAC upgrade, an electric heat pump system at Thoreau Elementary School, which is replacing an old gas-fired boiler system that's past its useful life. To the bottom is an envelope upgrade of the siding at the old Dickinson Elementary Gymnasium. And this gymnasium is near, it's not up at the Dickinson, it's lower Dickinson near Explorer Elementary School. Bottom right is our support services center and transportation, where we've implemented and installed our electrical infrastructure charging for our electric buses. And the top right is a trash compactor, new trash compactor installed at Inglewood Middle School. Trash compactors save between $5,000 and $10,000 annually for schools that have large amounts of waste hauling. It also reduces the amount of greenhouse gas for collections. So you can eliminate about 50 to 75% of the actual hauling that happens at your site. Okay, for code compliance, health, and safety, we have this category includes projects like access controls, ADA upgrades, safety improvements, security enhancements. And so pictured here is our warehouse racking project, which upgraded all of our warehouse racking. It was the original racking from the time we occupied the building, which was no longer up to code if it ever was. And so it actually helps us be compliant with City of Redmond Fire. So that was a great project. Bottom left is one of our district-wide installations of our physical lockdown buttons. These buttons are in the main office behind the staff. Top right is it looks like a garage door at Frost. What That's actually, we had a design flaw in the original door, which was unsafe, and so it was stuck in the down position, and so we replaced and redesigned the mechanism and system. So that's coming from the hallway into the commons. In bottom right is a water bottle filling station. Again, one of our district-wide installations of water bottles. This one at Audubon Elementary School. Okay, the next two categories are school and program improvements. These program improvements are can consist of building needs and program needs at the schools. Often it's portable facilities for capacity or upgraded portables. The picture on the left is a project to implement a new reader board at Eastlake High School. This was a project that was also part of a sponsored project where they raised funds to expand the reader board. The existing reader board just had like a ticker underneath it, so that was a great project. And then the project on the right is really Lake Washington High School's field project, which is still ongoing, but we're showing you what is the softball field. We were able to complete the softball field in time this fall for slow pitch softball. And then in the distance, you can see the rest of the fields are under construction, which will include the baseball field, a multi-purpose field with field lighting and batting cages. Okay. Yeah, any questions?
Director Meekoff?
As a new board member, I just want to make sure I'm up to speed. I saw in the renderings, especially for the elementary schools, it's noted like all-weather playfields. Mm-hmm. Does that mean turf? Does that mean, as someone who has spent a lot of time on the sand fields?
Yeah. Our current standard is a sand field, which is an all-weather field, albeit we're always looking to upgrade if we're able to. Rockwell Elementary, for example, will have a synthetic turf field.
Thank you.
Director Yoakum?
Quick question on the financial update for the 2022 construction levy, where it says that there is $19.3 million in program contingency and property. Does that contingency typically get used up? Does that get used up with the construction from that levy, or if not, how do we prioritize where the remaining levy funds go?
Yeah. Barbara can answer.
So we leave, the purpose of contingency is because as these projects are being built, things can happen, and so we have to build in contingency. So until we have all the projects done in this levy, we won't know if we need some of those funds. If everything comes in, which they typically do, under budget, if our projects come in under or at budget, then those funds will be remain in our capital program, and then we can make decisions on where those funds can be used. So then we would, again, determine if they can be used for the next projects that are upcoming. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was like a flow chart of if there's extra, then first it goes to this and then it will go to this. So it's always just continually reevaluated.
Yeah, and it's usually related to construction for major construction projects. It's not usually, it's separated because it's part of our construction levy versus the 4-year capital levy. So,
thanks.
Okay. And I'll just remind the last 5 slides that Brian did were related to our 2022 4-year technology and capital projects levy. What Brian focused on was the facility portion, and board meeting, I think 6 months ago, we had, we shared updates on what the uses of our technology portion. And again, those projects would not be possible. And some of them are behind the scenes, the trash compactor, those are things that you're not seeing every day, but those are still important to the day-to-day functioning of our district. And so in February, we have the renewal of the technology and capital projects levy, which will continue to provide funds for those very important and necessary projects. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'm trying not to sneeze, so I want to talk a little bit about LGO bonds and kind of review our 2022 and 2024 construction levy. Brian gave you an update as he shared with you that our levy funds come to the district over 6 years. For our 2022 construction levy. So we have not yet collected, we've collected actually less than half of the funds for the 2022. And yet we are needing the capacity additions that this levy provided prior to receiving all the funds. So we are opening all of those projects by fall of 27. And we accomplish that with what we call front funding, and you do that front funding with what we call limited general obligation bonds. Those are non-voted bonds. So we sold $50 million in LGO bonds in June of 2024 to front fund the middle school additions. That's what allowed them to open in fall of 24. And so we will potentially have an LGO bond sale for the high school additions out of this levy as well to front fund those costs. And then on the 2024 construction levy, those funds also come to us over 6 years, beginning spring of 26 through 2031. And the projects were planned to open based on project expenditures prior to that, we estimated prior to the levy going to voters in 2024. And so based on cash flow needs, we analyze and, are we going to need front funding of projects? The current law allows front funding to be used for capital upgrades and addition projects. And out of the 5 projects, 2 qualify under the current law, and that's the community pool and field house at Juanita High School, and then the Evergreen Middle rebuild and enlarge. Brian, you saw the rendering is technically addition because we are keeping a portion of the old building. And so what front funding allows us to do is avoid construction escalation. And so it will allow these 2 projects to be built sooner, avoiding construction escalation. And then the front funding is paid back with the levy proceeds once they're collected. And this is just another, again, some of this is repetitive, but you have to read it over and over sometimes before it's understandable. So what is an LGO bond? It's a short-term, non-voted debt paid back within a 6-year levy time frame. And the requirements are you pay back the principal with levy proceeds, but any interest is paid back using other sources. And our district has used the state construction assistance funds. The state does provide some construction assistance funds for our expansion projects. They do not provide any assistance for any new projects. When we opened Ella Baker and Clara Barton, we did not receive any matching funds from the state, but we do for our additions. The challenge is you're required to spend and open, you're required to basically spend all of the money to open the building, and then you can apply for the matching funds. So it doesn't actually help you for that specific project. It can provide funds for the future. So we've used those state construction assistance program funds to pay back the interest. When a district sells LGO bonds, there is a requirement to hold a public hearing, and you advertise that hearing in a public newspaper. So,
Sorry. something just occurred to me for the first time. You're right. You do need to read it. For the 6-year time frame, is it a 6-year time frame, or is it during the course of the levy that is funding? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Great clarification. It's during the course of the levy. So,
okay, so
if
it could be a shorter.
It could be shorter.
Okay.
So yes.
That had not occurred to me before. Thank you.
Yeah. So the other item that I wanted to bring to your attention is there is a potential to refinance our 2016 bonds. So we passed a bond measure. The last bond measure our district passed was in 2016, and that. And when you pass a bond measure, when a district passes a bond measure, then once the bonds are approved by voters, bonds are sold over time as funds are needed, and that provides a stable tax rate for our community. So our district sold those bonds between 2016 and 2018. All of our projects were open by 2019 for that bond. So just like some people do with a home mortgage, you might look at, 5 years later, 10 years later, you might look to say, is it beneficial to refinance? Our bond underwriter, D.A. Davidson, who we work with, they review and they provide us information of when it's beneficial. And they've shared that it is now beneficial for our district to refinance the bonds that were sold in 2016. And so this would achieve a savings to taxpayers of approximately $6.6 million, depending on the timing. And so because our district has continued to manage our finances well, we continue to have excellent bond ratings, and that allows us to sell bonds at a lower cost. And just as an aside, this is not something new. We have refinanced bonds before. We've saved taxpayers over $43 million from bond refinancing since 2015. So what we will be bringing for future board consideration is we will be recommending a refinancing to take advantage of the savings and the LGO and an LGO sale. The potential timing of that is by spring. We'll confirm timing and dollar amounts. We would have then a public hearing and board action on something called a delegating resolution. And what a delegating resolution does is it gives authority for the sale to be conducted within 1 year based on best timing. So sometimes you have a plan and then the market changes, and it gives district staff the authority to be flexible on when the timing of that sale is. We just had a bond rating review in December, so I put normally before a sale you do a bond ratings update. Because we just had a review, we may not need to go through that, but I put it in the timeline. So I would anticipate a bond sale sometime between June and August, with the closing of the sale or receipt of proceeds in August and September. And again, the outcome is savings to taxpayers. It allows our construction projects to be built sooner, avoiding construction escalation. And without kind of the LGO bond sales, projects could potentially need to be delayed, and which would increase construction costs. So I think I covered any questions. I know that's complicated, complex.
And so there's two different bond processes that are being discussed here. One is the refinancing of bonds. The other is the sale of LGO bonds. The consideration is to do them at the same time or in close proximity. And so as we're talking about them, we're sort of talking about them in conjunction. They're two separate actions, but they both save taxpayers dollars in the long run, and the LGO allows us to build projects sooner and avoid construction escalation.
And I forgot to mention that, we are working, I did mention it in my legislative update, we're working on legislation so front funding is allowed for all construction, including new construction. So that's something we've been working with our legislators the last 2 years. Lindsay?
Director Yocum.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to kind of follow up on that. How might the timeline for our 2024 construction projects change if LGO allows for new construction and not just capital upgrades and addition projects?
So we will, that would allow us to sell, potentially front fund the remaining new construction projects such as Smith and Kamaikan. We will have to analyze, once that legislation passes, we will have to analyze the cost of front funding versus the savings of the projects moving them forward. Because we also have to have the resources to pay the interest back. So that will be part of our analysis. But it should allow us to, potentially pull the projects forward a year, potentially.
Director La Liberty.
You identified 2 potential projects to use LGO for, currently under current law, to use LGO for. Is the expectation right now that we would use sell LGO bonds for both projects, or is that still being evaluated?
It's still being evaluated. The 2022, we would do that for as I mentioned, the high school projects, and it would have a quick payback period, so which is actually a good thing because of lower interest costs. So we're just evaluating the right balance between the two.
Okay, and then similarly, my follow-up questions would be, I assume you're also evaluating how much to fund with LGO.
Yes.
And mapping out the bang for our buck, right, and the cost savings and how quick we can.
Correct, and it could be done again depending on if the legislation passes, and then 2 years down the line we could also look to under the 2024 levy to look at it again. So it isn't a decision, a final decision, and then you're done. I mean,
it's a 4-dimensional decision.
We could continue to review.
Yeah.
Because as there's many considerations as we're doing all of these construction projects, cash flow being primary in that. We have to have cash on hand to be able to fund the projects that are active. Also, when you front fund, you then start paying the principal back. And so that's an annual, so it reduces your access to the funds that you're so it's all of these considerations that have to work out. And so there's lengthy spreadsheets and people who think about this deeply that provide those.
And I would assume another consideration is just like staff. It takes staff resources to do these projects, right? And so
correct.
You can't have too many of them going at once.
For example, we're already opening 3 projects in fall of 27, right? It would probably, Alcott, Emerson, and Redmond High Edition, right? So we probably would not add another project. So that's part of the other scheduling as you're timing your projects.
That makes sense.
Director Richter.
If anyone else has LGO questions first. I just had the technical question on the bond refi. The cost savings we get back from that goes into our general construction. That savings is applied to construction, not any other fund?
It's actually on the bond refinancing, the savings goes into debt service. So when you finance bonds, the principal and interest is paid out of our debt service. And so we levy an amount each year to pay that debt service back. So it basically reduces the amount that we need to levy on an annual basis to pay those bonds back. So ultimately saving taxpayers' funds. Great question.
Yeah, so in that instance, we actually don't see, as a district, the savings. It flows through directly to the taxpayers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned that there was a recent bond ratings review, and what goes into a bond ratings review, and what was the outcome of the most recent one?
Now you're testing me because I got to remember my A's and double A's and pluses. So we recently had a ratings review from both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. So districts, when districts sell bonds, they have to have a bond rating prior to selling any bonds. And that usually happens, again, prior to a bond sale. For the first time, and as long as I can remember, we had a rating, just a regular review. And and what's been happening across the state is districts are being downgraded during the ratings reviews because of perceived. The state of Washington has lower fund balances than a national trend, because in other parts of the nation, the state funding system isn't as stable. So districts in other parts of the country have to have much higher fund balances than districts in Washington, because in other parts of the country, the state can pull back their allocations at any time. So that said, you've heard the stories about many of our neighbors have, had lower fund balances, even some, and I've talked about binding conditions in the legislature. We fully expected, I should have brought my slides. They're in, for those of you that want to see the ratings information, I shared it with our budget advisory committee, and so they're on our website in the last budget advisory committee meeting. But we expected with Moody's to be downgraded, and we were. And we still have the highest bond rating with Moody's than any in the state. There's only 3 districts, Lake Washington, Issaquah, and Snoqualmie Valley. And so we are, I gotta think it's AAA1, or it's AA1 with Moody's. Thank you, Eric. You're gonna pull it up and test me. Okay,
I'm tracking right now.
AA1 with Moody's.
So far, so good.
And they said to us during our rating call that it was the most positive ratings downgrade discussion that they've had. So that was great. And then our next review was with Standard & Poor's. And Standard & Poor's has also been, we expected to be downgraded with Standard & Poor's. And districts, there's been some districts that have been downgraded 2 notches. And so we met with them, and on December 22nd, they let us know that our rating would stay the same. And we are now the only district in the state of Washington with a AA plus rating with Standard & Poor. So we still have the highest rating in the state of Washington. And so we're very, very pleased with that outcome of those ratings reviews. And again, the reviewers were very positive with their remarks about the strong financial management that they see in our district. And so it was a really positive feedback from them. So we're pleased with the outcome.
Thank you, yes. And I
I
think
got
we're
the
pleased with
A's
the
all
outcome
right.
too, yes.
All right.
And then that directly translates into saving our taxpayers money, because we
Absolutely.
can get lower interest rates on
Yes.
bonds and so on because of that. So thank you to your team for all that's gone into that over the years, and for that, yes, very positive outcome.
Yep, thank you very much. And I do have one last slide. I just want to, this is a note that Redmond Middle School students wrote to our construction crew after they finished their addition. So, but again, ultimately, this is all due to the support we receive from our community. So thank you very much.
Any last questions? Good. All right. The next item on the agenda is the board summary for monitoring report OE9. The monitoring report for OE9 sustainability was presented and approved at the December 8th, 2025 board meeting. I would like to thank Director Yoakum and Director Richter for drafting the board summary based on the discussion on December 8th. which is now presented for board approval. Are there any questions, clarifications, or discussion on the summary? If not, I will now entertain a motion to approve the board summary for OE9 sustainability as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
It has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Meekhoff to approve the board summary for OE9 sustainability as presented. Is there any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item on the agenda, we will be progress monitoring results to academic content, knowledge, and skills. Dr. Holman.
Yes, and so again, I like to go back to the why of this. This is a new addition to the board's governance process. The board has been monitoring policy for many years, since the adoption of policy governance and now coherent governance. And what we know about effective school boards and boards that have an impact on student outcomes and student achievement, those boards spend time talking about and discussing student outcomes and in particular student academic outcomes. And so with that in mind, the board determined that the concept of progress monitoring would be really important. The board receives consistent monitoring data, and that monitoring data is at a certain level for the board to review. And we know that if we are to make even more substantial progress for all of our student groups, digging into the data and being very explicit about the gaps in our success, gaps in our progress, and then what we're doing about it is really important. And so we had our first progress monitoring related to results 1. I think we all found high value in that conversation. And so tonight is the first progress monitoring for results 2. And so Dr. Rose is here to provide the board with a progress monitoring update that is directly connected to the study session we had tonight. So we'll be focused on secondary mathematics and in particular algebra in the middle schools. And so excited to continue to engage in this conversation with the board because as we highlighted in the study session tonight, it is of utmost importance that all of our students have success, and that means the system has to shift and change. And we're excited about this conversation. So with that, I'll hand it to Dr. Rose.
Okay, thank you. So as the first progress monitoring for R2, there's an excellent chance I'm going to raise more questions than I can answer, which is great because as you heard, we could have gone on much longer in the study session with all the background work there. So I'm excited to present to you what we have been thinking about and look for your thoughts and your further questions. So I thought as we dive into R2, I wanted to first just kind of locate what R2, what it's connected to and how it kind of plays out. So we did make a shift, as Dr. Holman said. We presented R2 in October instead of typically it would be February. And we really have been focusing in on results that are also part of our key performance indicators. And so as we're thinking about R2 and looking for additional data, one of the interesting things about R2 is that when we revised it a few years ago, it was really important to be looking at like what are the state testing scores? What are the grades? How are our students achieving at that level? That satellite data is really difficult to track in a progress monitoring. So we've really been thinking about like how do we actually have numbers that we're tracking, and like Dr. Holman was saying earlier, go to some of the stories. With R2 to have it really aligned with our KPIs has been really essential, and I'll talk about that in a little bit where. And I think we mentioned it earlier that our school improvement plans are also aligned to these KPIs, very specific to indicators in R2. So R2 is our academic content, knowledge, and skills. And the board is aware of that. So these are some of the slides you actually saw last October. And it's specific to thinking about literacy, math, and science. And so for progress monitoring, we dove into looking at math, and we wanted to be really specific in looking at 8th grade math and thinking about algebra. And for all the reasons that you heard in the study session, this is something that has been really important to us, and we are mid-path on this. And the data that we want to dive into will show both the things that our system's doing well and increase the urgency of what we're doing and why. So one of the things just to locate in thinking about like this, the story of Lake Washington is that we are a high achieving district, especially when you look comparatively. So when you look at our achievement as compared to the state, our students have some pretty terrific outcomes. What's been important to the board and what's important to us is to look beyond that. Like we're doing better than other people, but what does that actually mean? One of the things that we've been doing in this process and that the board has done is begin to really redefine what success is. So our numbers as far as SBA compared to the state could be success in a lot of ways. And I actually do want to celebrate that. I want to recognize that's a lot of really great work that our students and our families and our educators are really thoughtful. And so I want to celebrate that these are things that we do well. You've seen this slide before, and actually I think Director Guthrie may have been one of the folks who sent along this link to the resource for Education Recovery Scorecard a couple different times. When you compare Lake Washington School District, and you have to read the fine print in this carefully, but what I'd like you to see overall is that the trends are somewhat similar, except Lake Washington had our students were performing above the state before the pandemic and have recovered at a faster rate. So I wouldn't pay attention to the numbers on this slide really clearly, other than to affirm our teachers and our students and our families are operating from a really good place and have had success to reflect that. I bring this slide back to you. You saw either this one or it might have been the one that reflected 6th grade through 10th grade as another piece of why we're urgent. And when we think about I guess on one hand, you could look at this and say, mostly our achievement is pretty steady state. Yay. But that's not what we want for our students, especially when we look at our students that are furthest away from educational justice, our students where we've really focused. So this is to affirm, like, we've been doing good things and we continue to do them for most of our students, and we've redefined what success looks like for ourselves and for our students. And so I say that because—
Dr. Rose, sorry, can you go back to the previous slide real quick? Can you just explain, what the cohort analysis means, like
Yes.
what these numbers
Thank you.
signify?
So this is the cohort. Several years ago, what we wanted to do was look at what happens to students as they track through our system. So if we have a student for multiple years in a row, what happens with their scores on SBA? Like, can we track a difference with that? And we actually, in some places, like actually for 5th grade literacy, we can actually see that. When we track 3rd, 4th, 5th, we can see a positive correlation for the students that have been in our system. We see kind of a general overall uptick in their scores. What's also really interesting, if you go back into R2 for that specific cohort of 5th graders, there were, I think I'm not going to remember the exact number, but around 1,100 students were as part of that cohort. And what that means is, out of the class size of about 2,300 students, 1,100 of them had, we had their scores going over time. So this is what that cohort— that's a great question, Dr. Guthrie, thank you. We've been looking to see what difference does it make to a student if they're in our system, and use that as a way that we're really looking at the impact. So it kind of takes away from the what ifs or the what abouts and helps us really focus on what is our actual impact and how do we own that and adjust for that. Thank you. So when I say we are, like this slide, I will say, is a sea of red, and there's a lot of story behind this. So when you look at the first column, grade 8 students, percentage of grade 8 students meeting state standards on SBA and WAAIM, our goals for ourselves are high. So when we color code red, we are not meeting our own goals for ourselves. That is our color coding. So we have set goals for ourselves of, I'm going to try to be specific, but if we were going to be in the green, it would be to have achievement over 90% for our students. One of the things that is actually a celebration on this, and I think my next slide will show this, that over the last several years, we've had a continuous uptick in the annual trend. with most of our with different demographics. So not huge, 0.03, not a huge trend. The other things that I want to call out are things like looking at, we had an annual trend uptick of 2.1 for our Black African American students, and they still have a pass rate of 29.9. So yay, good things are happening, but there are significant gaps in what we want for our students. The other piece that's super interesting is that in many of our benchmark district ranking, where we look at our demographic groups of students and we compare them to 10 other local districts that we have chosen out of, like, looking to see who's similar. In benchmarking, in many places we actually do well, again, compared to what other districts are doing. Not compared to what we want for students, but as we kind of locate, like, where do we find our whole story, it's complex. So I'll pause there for a moment, and I'll tell you that my theory of action in this presentation is to take us through and look at some of the numbers and then go back and see what your questions might be. So there are, like, questions on this slide, happy to take them, and there might be more interesting discussion to come. So one of the things that's really interesting when we look at where our students are achieving is that students have multiple identities. Students might be in multiple categories. And so we wanted to look at, this slide doesn't quite pull it out, there might be some more data that'll come along a little bit later. But when you look at the demographic percentages from students from low-income households versus low-income, you see some pretty strong differences. And so the way to read this is, like, if I look at, if I'm looking down the low-income column, 15.6 of our students who identify as coming from low-income households are Asian. 45.2 of our students who say they're non-low-income identify as Asian. And I apologize, I should have highlighted this slide for you. If I was going to highlight, I would have highlighted the bottom two lines to say, take those out. If you take those two out, the numbers above will add up to 100. So it's looking at what are the demographics, and then students that are eligible for ML or students receiving special ed services are a separate percentage. So when you look at the numbers, 35.3 of our students who come from low-income families are Hispanic or Latino of any race. Non-low-income is 7.4. So it's just really interesting to see where different groups are in our overall population. And that's part of, I wanted to give that background when we look at some things about thinking about where the achievement of our students is and thinking about intersectionality. So this slide shows the percent of our students from low-income households who get a 3 or 4 on SBA and WAAIM. So from all of our students in low-income households, 28.8 of them, with any other way that they might be registered in our system, 28.8 students from our low-income households get a 3 or higher on the state assessment. If I take out intersectionality, so if students that are just from low income and do not receive special education services and are not ML, 43.3 of those students get a 3 or a 4 on the SBA. So what this is doing is really highlighting, and if you look at the next slide, then you can see, like, students that are from low-income households and receiving special education services, 4.5 of them are getting a 3 or 4 on the SBA. So it's really giving us a much more specific problem definition and really helping us think about who are the students and how are we thinking about responding to them. Let me pause there for a moment. Any questions, comments?
I just want to make sure. So if we take your top row there, students from low-income households, the group size is 302, and the 28.8 is the percent of those. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. Thanks.
So if you add up if you leave the top row alone and you add up the bottom 4, you'll end up with all of our students. Okay, so one of the other things, and again, I'm giving you a lot of data, and this is where more questions might come out of, because as we're thinking about progress monitoring, there are a bunch of different pieces we're looking at, and we're using them to think about, in addition to all the work that you've heard, where do we really narrow our efforts? Like, where do we want to make a difference? So this one we wanted to bring in, and again, this is one point of data. This is like looking at spring 2025 student growth percentile levels from the 8th grade math SBA. Again, we'll take the data with a grain of salt. And what we really want to look at is our students that are in the low growth percentile, meaning that they are, they're all students who are in the bottom quartile. The growth that our students make over time, so the goal would be that if you're in the lower quartile, that you are making aggressive acceleration in your learning. And when we look at our students that we're really concerned about, they are not accelerating their growth. So that's a specific problem that we're looking at. We want to accelerate the growth of our learners. And specific populations of students do not have their growth accelerated. Okay, so hold that data. So this is thinking about like, who are the learners? What do we know about their learning? How can we reflect it based on state testing? But for progress monitoring and for the work that we're doing right now, we actually really want to get into how are our students doing with grades? And how are they doing with achievement in like things that we can much more directly control and get into thinking about their experience in the classroom. So when we look at this is the percentage of grade 8 students with a C or higher in 8th grade math courses. So this is any course that an 8th grader was in 2025. What grade did they get? And so I bring this in, and again, I'm not going to go through each number except to say the annual trend was again positive, and that was true of the year before. So this is 2024's R2, same exact slide, but thinking about what are the grades of our students. And so we've got a positive trend where I really think you're seeing what Nyla and Wendy were talking about with the work with teachers. You're seeing that start to show off in terms of grades because we're not seeing a dip down in SBA. We're actually seeing that tick up in SBA. Sorry, I'm going to make you dizzy with going back and forth too much. But we're seeing a consistent tick up in SBA, and we're seeing a consistent tick up in grades. So that to say, like, we actually think that our grades are solid because we're seeing the information together. So a couple things I wanted to call out with this. So we're seeing that uptick. One of the things that is super interesting, and again, this is going to what Nyla and Wendy were talking about, this is 8th grade course failure over time. So percentage of students that failed at least one semester of math in 8th grade. Green is geometry. Orange, I think that is Algebra 1. And blue, I think, is 8th grade math. So there's some takeaways with this. Students in geometry, it's a smaller number of students, but they're less likely to fail 8th grade math.
This is students taking geometry in 8th grade.
Yeah, yes, they took, or so yes. So 8th grade course failure, yes. So it's 8th grade students in algebra, geometry, and 8th grade math. So I think you see, so one thing that you clearly see, students who are in 8th grade math fairly consistently fail at higher rates than the other two courses. You also see a pretty significant downtick in students failing. Still alarming, but for the most part, you see a downtick. I think I can explain the 23 to 24 and 24 to 25, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Let me see. Okay, I'll hold on to that thought. I will show you why I think that tick goes up momentarily. One of the other things that's super important is we had somewhat of a theory of action of that students who took 8th grade math were more prepared for algebra. And Director Guthrie, you brought this up earlier. But this is a chart of the students who took 8th grade math in 23-24 and then algebra in high school in 24-25. And what you see there is 61% of students who got an A in 8th grade math got an A in algebra in high school. And if you follow that chart all the way down, 70% of the students who got an N in 8th grade math got an N in high school algebra. So our theory that if they took it, they'll be fine, like it doesn't really get to the heart of what we want for our students. One of the other pieces of context to layer around this is that our students are now in high school. So if they have a chance of getting a full credit of math in Algebra 1 in middle school. They take that into high school with them, so they're entering into a 6-period day with a full potential credit. We have some anecdotal data, and I can talk about this in a little bit, but what we're hearing now from parents and from students, and actually some staff members who have kids who took algebra last year, they actually passed with a C or above and felt like they wanted a little bit more time with it because they passed with a C or above with a lot of intervention. They're now taking algebra at high school with a B+ at this semester. So that's story. That's not like a massive data point, but that's part of our theory of action and it's part of our plan of action is that as students are taking Algebra 1 at middle school, what Algebra 1 looks like at high school for those students who need it looks different than it did. And what we're actually finding, this has been really interesting, the alignment between high school and middle school is much tighter right now because middle school algebra had been taught as, the teachers actually, of course, had this conception, it's a high school class, I'm going to teach it like a high school class. And as such, they were much stricter than high school algebra teachers who are much more like, the students are coming to me, I'm going to be super flexible to teach it. And they had all students. All students are in Algebra 1, so teachers were very flexible in thinking about how to meet students' learning needs. Not making algebra easier, but how to meet students' needs. And so we're actually hearing that across the system of teachers and of our building leaders saying, when you look at how Algebra 1 is taught at high school, it's very different than the way Algebra 1 was taught kind of right now, but really a couple years ago, Algebra 1 in middle school was very different than what a student would experience. And it's high school has been much more aligned to the pedagogy that we talked about in the study session. Okay, so here we are. We have been, you can see the uptick in students taking Algebra 1 and geometry. And so that goes back to why I have that theory that we have a little bit lower, that this little uptick here in students failing is we have more students that are taking more challenging class. So this year, our registration in 8th grade math is down to close to zero, to a small n, with algebra and geometry going consistently up for the past several years. And what that's looked like, so you can again see, like this is so different from the last slide that you saw about grades was percentage of grade 8 students with a C or higher in 8th grade math. This is specific to algebra. So this is October, R2. We had the grade tick up with most of our demographics a little bit down in terms of grades, but it's pretty significant. And why this is really significant is look at the number in the upper right hand, 1,798 students, took algebra. So the highlighted one, 1,798 students took algebra by 8th grade or within 8th grade. 97 of them last year from low-income households, and 70 were students receiving special education services. So this is what you saw in October 2025. This is what you saw the year before. Students in algebra, instead of 1,798, you saw 1,559 the year before. Instead of 90 students from low-income households, you saw 62. Instead of 60 students receiving special education services, you saw 32. So when we've thought about a little bit that we're seeing some widening of some gaps in some ways, and by some measures, and this is again like telling stories with numbers can go a lot of different directions, but we've been significantly increasing the number of students taking algebra over the past couple of years, and the diversity of the students taking algebra over the past couple of years. And our annual trend, when we did this, actually, if you look at the annual trend up there for all grades, is minus 1.3 in 2024 data. And last year, when we added, how many is that? Let me go back. When we added several hundred students taking algebra, 150 students taking algebra, our annual trend was actually 0.1 down. And then we dive into it, and there's a lot of work to do, but looking at like overall, our teachers and our students have been responding to how do our students learn algebra. From 2023, so this was R2 in 2023, we went from 1,442 students taking algebra to 1,559 2 years ago to 1,798 last year, and now that is this slide. We're not 100%, but we are making significant strides in students taking algebra. So one of the things that we thought would be interesting is looking at, over the past several years, what's the course distribution for students receiving special education services? So you can see 23 to 24, Algebra 1, there's a significant jump, and there was a huge jump this year. So the students taking functional math, their general math, their 8th grade math, math 6 plus, 7 plus, those are things that would be specific to what the IEP team decided. I don't have a lot of information about that right now, and I'm happy to bring it back to the board. But it is, I think, really something that we've really deeply been thinking about, to have 63% of our students with IEPs taking Algebra 1. So a couple things to think about. We've had a significant increase in the number of students accessing algebra by 8th grade, including students with IEPs and students from low-income households. We've had a relatively consistent C or above rate. I was looking at the data for all students, Black, African American students receiving special ed services. It really is complexity of change. So as much as it looks like things go up or things go down, the numbers of students also really widely vary, from 70 students one year to 30 students the next to 90 the next in some of our different populations. So we're at the point right now where there's a lot of really interesting things to look at, and to be able to say this caused this is difficult. What we're in the business of right now is really thinking about, okay, with all these different things, what are we doing? So elementary system supports for math, similar to secondary. All school improvement plans are focusing on math, literacy, and SEL at elementary. We have, as you heard Wendy talk about, she is close partners with Jennifer Gaylord. We have vertical alignment of instructional resources and professional learning from elementary grades all the way through Algebra 2, I should say. We have in-school support frequently from our elementary math specialist, and we have our coaches in each building that also have done pretty intensive learning around math in order to support our teachers and our students there. Lots of professional learning for administrators, both opt-in and structured, and a continual focus on, we're in year 5, which is crazy, of implementing IM at elementary, but keep on working on that. Secondary, so the elementary is kind of ongoing general. Secondary is really specific, and system is going to be a little bit more general. When I get to the school slide, it'll be more specific. So SIP focus for all schools. Every building leader out there, anywhere you ask them what are you focused on, they're going to be able to talk to you about their focus on math this year. I guarantee that. We've got that vertical alignment. We've got the alignment of instructional practices between middle and high school, like I was talking about with algebra, and that actually is like all of the courses in high school. Professional learning for math teachers, some has been required. There's been a lot opt-in, and as we move into implementation, that will be something that we require. There's been, and Wendy didn't get a chance to talk about this because I took up too much of their airtime, but the department chairs in all content areas, including math, have been really focused on problems of practice of learning, and they have been for several years. Like, especially, I think especially our math department chairs have really been engaged in thinking about vertical alignment and success of all students. So that's been pretty powerful. Last 3 bullets you've heard about. School level is really where there is some really interesting work going on. So there's been a shift of, I think I mentioned this before, that all of that support that went to our students in 8th grade math is now going to Algebra 1. And it's like hands-on, really thinking about what are the best ways that this can work. And it's been, like, our schools have been really pushing to be innovative. So like one of our schools, actually I think it's more than one of our schools, I was talking with them about their support. They use some of their safety net staffing to have a math teacher who floats during the one period where they've scheduled many Algebra 1 classes. And the teacher floats between, not to so much to do, like maybe some work with individual students, but small group like you might see at elementary. One of the other things that's been really different from when I first got here, there used to be like the algebra teacher in a school who taught all the sections, like the algebra teacher, the geometry teacher. Most of our schools are having many different teachers teach algebra so that the teachers are teaching 6th grade, 7th grade, and algebra so they get the continuum of it. And they really are tight PLCs. They've been super close. And I've been in multiple buildings where I've seen that PLC work happening like in real time, where a teacher pops in and says, hey, I tried this in my last class with this activity you're doing right now. I made this adjustment and it worked really, really well. Why don't you try? So you see like that kind of work happening that's just really, really productive with their PLCs. There's been some of the schools are providing before and after school supports for students. There's also been one of our supplemental resources right now is Alex. Some of our math departments and building leaders are doing really intentional use of Alex. They're giving students who are maybe don't have the procedural fluency additional specific work in Alex to help them build up that muscle. Really flexible teaching and assessing practices, so not thinking like how do we just get a student to pass algebra, because part of this is knowing how important algebra is and being solid in it. So thinking about, schools are thinking of other ways they can assess students. And at the semester thinking of if a student really struggled with the concept, maybe they don't need to take the whole class. Maybe it's just that assessment or that unit. How do we get them up to speed with what they need to know right now and be able to like reward what they do know and ensure that they know it well. And then a high intensity focus on individual students. We were focused on in our last strategic leadership meeting, which was 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. The entire time was spent on talking about school improvement plans and putting our leaders into collaborative groups to talk about what they were really focused on. The conversations were fantastic. The leaders that I went to different groups and the leaders I was talking to were saying things like, okay, the 20 students in my school that are at risk of getting an N right now, here's what I'm thinking about for them as a system. And it wasn't move them to a different math class. And that's a kind of a traditional thing of, and I get the linear thinking, but systemically, we've said in the past, the students at this level of skill in math, we're going to put them at that class for that level of skill, which we don't do in other content areas. We think the student is at this level, how do we help them access grade level standards and be successful in the level that we know that they can be at? We do not say that in English the same way that we do. So thinking about what Wendy talked about earlier about having our students have a math disposition, maybe this will resonate with you, but I've had so many people in my life, and I may have said this myself, I'm not a math person. I get someone else to do math for me. We don't accept that when people say that about reading, right? We get all upset, you don't love reading? How can you not love reading? Reading's amazing. And that's something that we accept as math. So when, over the years, as I was going into 8th grade math classes, the students were super clear, oh, I'm an 8th grade math student. Like, this is who I am. That's classes I'm going to register for. That's how I identify. We want students to be really successful, and maybe there are things that we need to help them really focus on and learn, but that high intensity focus on individual students. And I'll say, I know, as much as building leaders are saying, I know the names of the 30 kids who are at risk for an N, some of them are going to not just be at risk for an N, they're going to get an N. And then we need to figure that out. This is not a perfect solution by any way, shape, or form. The NCTM talks about Algebra for All as they actually sort of loosely recommend against it and say, like, 8th grade math standards are super solid. People should learn those well. Yes, and that was not the system that Lake Washington was going to go for. And we saw who wasn't accessing. So as we're looking at, like, how do we think back to those slides at the beginning, like way back at 5 o'clock? How do we change those graphics? We don't change it gently. We change the system. We change the structure. So that's what this is, and we are very, very aware of all of the different things that we need to do in order to support our students. We're very aware of that we need to keep doing that. This is not easy work. It's not something where there's a quick program, but it's something that we're deeply committed to. So next steps, keep on looking at grades at district and school level. Provide that vertical articulation support plan for students. So 6th grade through 8th grade, what's happening in the school. As they go to high school, what is that vertical articulation plan of support and that communication? We know that we need to strengthen credit retrieval options. Those are something that we actually have an action program review going on right now. And that's true for all content areas, but I put it in as something we've been thinking about with math. Continue with the adoption and implementation process and think about like that low floor, high ceiling, strong support that the curricular options we're looking at have, and then continually evaluate potential gaps and needs and new resources and provide supports.
Jen, can you go back to slide 12 that shows the the success outcomes with the intersectionality between low income students receiving special education services?
You're going to have to tell me which is
Yep,
slide
keep
12, because
going
mine are
back.
like 10 and 63.
Yep,
I
keep
didn't
going.
remember them.
I'll tell you when. one more, I believe. There we go. When Dr. Rose shared this with Cabinet today, this slide almost took my breath away. It's data like these that challenge us to really be reflective when we say all students should be and can be successful. And when I see the struggles that educational systems have had to actually make that a reality, yet we are committing to doing that work. It is no small task. We are asking educators to change their practices to be able to change these data. Because when these data change, that means our overall picture of what education looks like for kids is going to change. And then if you go to the next slide, and one more, you highlight the three. This is a really important slide because this isn't in comparison to a standard. This is in comparison to peers across the state. And so 40% of our students receiving special education services in 8th grade, 40% of them grew at a rate lower than their peers. Peers meaning we had a similar academic result last year, and so my growth trend was 40% of our students receiving had a lower growth trend than their peers across the state. And I believe what we're saying is that we can't, as a system, accept that level of growth if we're going to accomplish our goals. The other thing I pulled up was the 6 components of culturally responsive education. Mm-hmm. And they were shared with us when we did our site visit at both Juanita and Thoreau. Juanita, it was mentioned. At Thoreau, we kind of dug into it. And as I think about how does instruction and how do environments need to change, and our teachers are working actively to change practice. I mean, I know that for a fact. The work that's going on is tremendous, and I believe this is how we start to see shifts in outcomes for kids. The 6 conditions or 6 components of culturally responsive education. Engagement. It's easy to say, and when you think about a diverse group of students in any classroom setting, elementary, middle school, high school, our preschool classrooms, engagement means that every student is actively engaged, not some students. In our study session tonight, it was commented of engagement doesn't mean a teacher asks a question and 2 students raise their hand and respond. It's the lowest level of engagement that you can have, because it takes no cognitive engagement for me as a student to sit in a class, not raise my hand, and not participate. To be engaged means I'm actively participating in the content. Cultural identity. And I would say, well, I'll just talk about Lake Washington School District. The various cultural identities that are represented in our school district are significant. Honoring those, seeing those, understanding those as educators, it's tremendously difficult, but it's also tremendously rewarding. Because when you start to understand the cultural identity that's present in your classroom, things change, because you start to understand students and families. You understand why a student shows up the way they do, why they respond the way they do. That leads to the next component, which is relationships. If a student has a relationship with the adults and their peers, then they have and feel a sense of belonging. They experience that environment differently, which leads to the next component of vulnerability, meaning I can actually say I don't understand. I can say I need help. and maybe a peer helps me, maybe my teacher helps me. And the next component is assets. All of our students show up in our classrooms with assets. Every single one of them. There's no student that doesn't show up without an asset. And our responsibility as educators is to understand how those assets build them up as learners in our classrooms. And then the last component is rigor. None of the work related to culturally responsive education is about lowering the bar. It's about all students accessing high rigor. And so as we look at these data and we know our system is working diligently to change outcomes and change trajectory for students, the work related to culturally responsive education really transcends all content areas. And as we think about mathematics and specifically tonight algebra, and then we think about what we heard in the study session related to materials and instructional design, you can really start to see the theory of action of as instruction changes, as our materials empower our teachers to have different experiences for our students, that the potential for outcomes to change increases dramatically. And so these data really, spoke to me today as we were looking at them, because there's not a person in our district that would say we're satisfied with this. And giving our teachers the tools to be able to make changes are tremendously important. So that's my my comments about this, and just the importance of all of these component parts being put together to change this. So.
And shout out to Tim Krieger for all his work getting all the data together too.
Director Meekhoff.
I just have a couple of wonderings. Something that I noted is, I don't know, historically with math data, is there kind of a dwindling of the middle happening? Because when you look at the 8th grade and 9th grade chart, you see really, really high performing, and then the D and the N. But I'm wondering if that's new as someone who doesn't have a long history studying math data, or if that's how it's always been.
See if I can get to
do you know which one I'm talking? I don't know.
This one?
No, it's and it has the yellow. Yes.
Oh, that one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So
That
I'm
one,
wondering.
okay.
I mean, there I see like a pretty clear. I just called it like dwindling of the middle. But when you have 61% at A and then 70 at N, in terms of the ones that fail 8th grade math and continue to fail algebra, but that like B to C range just seem. I don't know. I'm just wondering.
Right.
And
so
then
it's so if I'm so most of this, like, we're looking at where the kind of the big chunks are.
yeah.
Like, so if I got a B plus, I'm 33% likely to get a. If I got a B plus in 8th grade math, I'm 33% likely.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I'm seeing that differently now, and
Yeah.
I guess I'm still wondering though if that is the case in our district. This if we have a lot of high performing, because my kind of follow up
Right.
question to that is, how many of these high performing students are receiving outside math enrichment and support?
Yeah. So one number that's not attached to this is what the N is. So that would be helpful. That might be something I can bring back, like to know
Okay.
what the N for the students who got an N is,
Mhm.
because this number of students who got an A, I can guarantee is higher than the
Okay.
students who got a D or an N. So
Okay.
that makes
Yeah.
it look like everything's equal on here when it's really not.
No, I definitely know that more are doing well
Right.
than, but I just, when we're thinking about how to better support our students, I think along with, the culturally responsive pieces that Dr. Holman's talking about, what can we replace or provide for students who don't have access to outside math enrichment and resources that are so, widely available for non-low income students in the area.
Yeah. I think that'll be really interesting. I'm going to say this without being able to ground it in a whole lot of actual data. What I have observed over the years of most outside help that parents get for their students is the sort of algorithmic help, like the tutoring on can you do this type of math problem faster, or like the more traditional. What I don't see are like tutoring around the kind of math thinking that Wendy led us through, or like building thinking classrooms types of thinking, where it really is about the math conceptual piece. And maybe it is, but I think about like a lot of that tutoring is lining students up to do typical school math best. So I say that. What I know about our goals and our practice and our teachers is that we want our students to be successful without needing that outside tutoring. That it's not about like achievement of the best. It's really about like solid math learning and how do we know.
No, I definitely agree with you there. I think the way that it's happening looks different from the way we want it to. I think what brought me to that is having a kiddo who struggled in math, and I took them years ago to Mathnasium, and I was shocked at the number of little kids in there that are there nearly several times a week, getting sometimes pre-kindergarten even, getting that instruction.
Yeah, thank you.
Director Yoakum?
Just off of Director Meekhoff's, I was going to ask a question there. I think it was towards one of the last slides where you were talking about before or after school help. I'm just wondering if that is PTSA or district sponsored, and kind of to that point, if it's district sponsored, how are we ensuring that students who need this service are actually able to receive it? So if it is something that you're moving, offsite, or you're going to, a private location for math tutoring, okay, that's on parents. But if it's something that the district is offering, then how are we ensuring?
So it's actually, I would say this year we're kind of in the innovating and piloting different resources. So what I'm specifically referring to is actually not district sponsored. It's at Timberline Middle School on Thursday mornings. And so it's the school saying, like, we've got some, I think it's mostly staffed with parents that are organized by the teachers for students to come in who need extra help for some time in the morning on Thursday mornings. So, but I think that's what you bring up is a great point of and that's something that we're looking at actively is what's the menu of supports for students, and how do we ensure that we can have those in schools for our students, thinking about like all the other restrictions, all those different things, but what actually makes a difference for students, and how do we make sure all students have that?
Well, and if you find that is helpful for students, it is more, are our families who are classified as low income, or low income students, are they able to get to those before or after school programs? So that's more what I'm thinking about. Is it targeting the right population, or is it just like, I want to go do more math? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. Thank you.
Director Liberty?
There's a chart where it shows the percentage of students who are taking eighth grade math, algebra, and geometry. Nope. That's the one. Yeah. Okay. Am I reading this right? That 50% in 25, 26, 50% of eighth graders are taking geometry. Is that what that's saying, or is it?
Yeah, pretty close.
So does that stand to reason then that 50% of students are taking algebra in 7th grade now?
I'd have to go back and look specifically, but yeah, that's.
Okay, I'm thinking about this in the context of some of the curriculum adoption stuff, and I didn't realize that our students were so many of our students were so accelerated now that 7th grade algebra is now, I guess,
relatively standard.
We had, if I don't know if the norm is the right word, but the majority of students are taking, it appears, are taking algebra in 7th grade. That was not the case.
So before we even started this intentional building of the pathways, we had about a third of our students were taking geometry in 8th grade.
Okay, and it is a pretty, when you look at the chart, it's also a pretty, I think, to me at least, significant increase. I mean, in the last few years, essentially up 10% of students are now accessing it in 7th grade from 2022. This is, I guess, I apologize, it's beyond the scope of this presentation, but I'll ask anyway. I mean, is there anything we have done differently systematically that has caused that?
Yeah.
Oh, and what is that?
So I would say there's actually been a wholesale shift in attitude towards math acceleration for a bunch of different reasons. But I'll actually say that the board has been really supportive of thinking about how is algebra for all students? And I think we shifted from a mindset of, I'll go differently. We started piloting, so we started really talking about the shift in math pathways. We started talking about it publicly in 2019, but it had actually been something that had been kind of observed for a while. Like I shared in cabinet that my first year here, I was talking with my former supervisor about like, man, we really have a problem with math pathways. We need to look at 8th grade math. And I went and talked to different principals, and we all had a different idea. Like I ran the meeting that I said, let's all talk about the problem with math pathways, and everybody had a different idea. So we spent a couple of years going, no, we have to get to clearer problem definition of what's inequitable about our math pathways. And so we started building in 2020. Was when we first had the group of teachers and administrators and parents talking about, like, let's do a problem definition for our math pathways. And we started at that point planning for adding 6+ curriculum. And so I guess it would have been 3 years, that was 4 years ago. So 3 years ago, we started piloting 6+ with enhanced curriculum at a couple different middle schools. And I can get you the list if we want. But a couple schools, 2 schools said we're all in. One school said we're going to do like 50% in to pilot this. And then kind of had that same thing for the last couple of years where more schools kind of came on board with, we want to move to implementing this. And then this is the year that we actually said 8th grade math is going away. But we've been slowly moving up through the grade levels of providing support in terms of instructional materials, professional learning for teachers, and really a lot of like working with different departments to go through that exact presentation you saw at 5 o'clock with some of those same slides and say, like, let's look at this and understand what it means that we are saying about how we help our students learn and access. And as much as people are like, we can be very traditional and say, I learned math this way, I think this is the way math ought to be, like only people who want to really accelerate should go ahead in math. You look at those slides and you think, that can't stand. 88% of our students with free and reduced lunch families are in 8th grade math, 12% get access to algebra. So that's a really long-winded way to say we started systemically changing a couple of years ago with looking at the why and then helping teachers with the how.
This is a wonder right now. I mean, I know we're not here today to like as part of like this is progress monitoring. We're not doing summative annual monitoring here, but I can't help myself. And thinking about like the data that we are currently collecting and reporting, and to me it does make a big difference when we're looking at historical trends. I know we've talked about this before with algebra, but it's not just more students are accessing algebra. It's more students are accessing each rung. I mean, not rung. I get maybe it is just rung. Each rung of higher, and I think we just need to be thoughtful about that when we're monitoring in future years and thinking about trends. And I don't. Yeah.
So one thing
I know you're all thinking about this, but candidly, I wasn't until 8:45 tonight.
Yeah. 2 things to think about. One is we've been monitoring grades, but grades have not come in yet. So as soon as we actually have first semester grades hit, that's going to be a very different discussion of like, okay, we know who we're talking about. We're going to be specific about that. One thing I can almost guarantee that you will hear about, and it's accurate, is algebra at 9th grade is now going to be a highly distilled group of students that are very likely going to be from low-income families, may have IEPs, and maybe students of color. That's likely going to be a very smaller group than we've had at 8th grade, and we'll continue to really work on that. I think that's something that's going to be there that we're going to just acknowledge and have to and really think about. What we do believe is that by taking steps to ensure that nearly all students are going to be successful in algebra at 8th grade is we really open the door, like I said earlier, for things like AP Sciences, WANIC, internships, like all the things that come along with you have algebra by 8th grade and you walk into high school with a credit. So we know that we're creating a problem in a different level, different way. So at some point, we're going to look at our math pathways and say, who's accessing geometry? And that's going to be super valid, and I'm really proud of us that all students are going to access algebra. So we will get there. We'll continue to think about it. But the benefit to our students by making this shift, and part of it is like as a system, we could have tried to wait till everything was solved for. We might be here a while. So we're just going to take some steps and work on solving the problems that we create.
Can I toss in some street data around Director Liberty's question? Because this does not surprise me at all, having had kids move through this system. And I have a college freshman, so class of 2025, and then a current 10th grader and a current 8th grader. They've had 3 different pathways through this system. The system has been changing around them, and I've been experiencing that as a parent. So I remember going in, when my class of 25 student was, she was in 6th grade, and it was that decision point of, do you go to Algebra 1 in 7th grade, which puts you on track to be on that green line in geometry in 8th grade, or do you wait and do you go to Math 7? And I would characterize it actually as active discouragement from going into algebra in 7th grade, I was not discouraged, and that's what she ended up doing, and it was a big leap because she was skipping, as you were talking about earlier, 2 whole years of curriculum. There were, I made her do Khan Academy over the summer. She hated it. And then when she got into algebra, she's like, thank goodness, because I hadn't covered negative numbers in math yet. The only exposure I had to negative numbers was through Khan Academy in that summer going into Algebra 1. And I was actually reflecting on that because my 8th grader, my current 8th grader, was homesick today. And so I was having her do some math on the side. And she was working on exponents and multiplying and dividing exponents with negative numbers. And because she's been through now that pathway of 6 plus, 7 plus, and now she's in Algebra 1, and she was like, this is so easy. Because she had that time to really solidify those concepts. So yeah, this data really doesn't surprise me at all, just watching my kids navigate that system. It doesn't surprise me. I think some of what this speaks to is the stronger foundation that these 25, 26 8th graders, all of whom have been through that 6 plus, the ones who are in geometry started with 6 plus, so they already got more of a base than my college freshman did. And one thing I didn't know as she was going through Algebra 1, a lot of the students who were in Algebra 1 with her were 8th graders retaking it. She said the majority. She was sort of in the minority as a 7th grader. And so it does not surprise me that the current 8th graders, with that benefiting from all the system work that has been done, are more likely to be ready for geometry than in 8th grade versus retaking Algebra 1. That's definite street data, but I think it really does illustrate some of these points and really a lot of the really thoughtful work that is hard to see unless you're really embedded in it. I'll stop rambling now, but yes, it's been a lot, and I see it making a difference for students, and we're not even there yet. Like this is really, as you've said, I think multiple times tonight, this is really only midway through this implementation. Yeah. So
I think one other place this is going to show up, and we didn't put it in the slides earlier, is OE10, how students feel about learning, how they feel about themselves. And I say that from street data, having been out at Inglewood. I went out there last year just to go walk schools with the principal and see classrooms, and the math department heard I was coming and insisted that I go to all of their algebra classrooms, and that's where I saw the teachers working in that PLC. And I was talking with students, and I always ask students different ways to tell me, what are you learning, why is it important, how do you feel about your learning? And so I asked this group, because the teachers had told me this is a group that they were sort of co-teaching, push and co-teaching in some of the classrooms, that hadn't always liked math. And so I was asking students, 1, this teacher's fine, but math, no. And 5, this is great. Where would you put yourself as a math learner? Not the class, not the teacher. Where would you put yourself as a math learner? And most of the students were 3. And my follow-up was okay, is that new? Have you always been a 3? And they were oh no, we've been 1s and 2s. We've hated math. We've been bad at math. That's their main thing. We've been bad at math, so we didn't like it. And now our teacher asks us questions, and now we talk to each other. Now we are doing different things. If I don't understand what's happening, the teacher will help me reteach it, or I've got my math buddy that will work through it together. now I like math. And so, I mean, it's that whole identity, especially talking to middle school students, like all of the world they shut off from themselves if they think they're bad at something. And we don't like things that we're bad at. So we really think about, like, how do we help students feel like they're solid and they're learners and they can do hard things.
Director Yocum.
Okay. This is about the special education service table that you have here, and kind of also looking at the graph we were just looking at. 26% of students in 8th grade receiving special ed services are not in algebra or geometry. And so I'm just curious, right? Like when we look at what 9th grade looks like, right? When you said there's going to be the small group, like there's going to be a large chunk there. I guess my question is more of functional math and general math, and you may not be able to answer that now, but I'm wondering if there's a way that, I don't know if it's in a board brief or in something, we can get a description of like what are those? We have 25% of special education students in functional math and general math, and that's something that we don't ever hear about. We hear 6+, 7+, 8th grade algebra, geometry, but we don't hear about those two. So just if we could hear and learn more about what that is. Thanks.
Great point, thank you.
Director Richter.
Well, Director Guthrie sniped some of my comment, but I'm going to make it anyway, which is just that this presentation is very fascinating to me because I happen to have a 6th grader coming into it, an 8th grader right there, and a 10th grader who went through before the changes. So it's been fascinating to hear what you've been saying. The 10th grader did that jump from, I think it was 6 or 6+ math to algebra in 7th grade. The one that's in 8th grade right now did the whole quest progression, is in geometry, so that top green line. And then the 6th grader coming in, I don't know what's going to happen next year. We're going to see. So just appreciate the presentation. I will say, same as Director Guthrie, that comparing the 10th graders' ability to get into algebra, where it was very much the message was it was discouraged, this might be too much, to what I'm hearing this year, it was not pleasant to have an active, discouraging message directed at a parent of a child, and so I congratulate on that going away. Also in the presentation tonight, I honestly really appreciated just hearing you say that it's not a perfect system by any means, but it's a better system, and we're working on that. And this is combining both the study session and the board meeting right now in my head, but appreciated honestly what you were saying earlier. People online can go watch the study session about teaching the usefulness of math, not just the formula, because there's usually a place where all of us top off in our math ability. And personally, I recognize that point in my own past. It may not. It was far off in the future of these math courses, but still, it hits. If you don't know why you're taking the class, it ceases to be as important. So really appreciated that. And I think I will stop there for the moment. Thank you.
So I'll say briefly, so way back in the day, and I certainly can't directly blame my high school math teachers for this, but in 8th grade, my hero was Marie Curie, and I wanted to be a nuclear physicist. And just moved from small town to big city and hit my head directly into the brick wall of math, then became an English major, which I'm super happy about, but.
I just wanted to add too, I think we need to be mindful that girls especially get that message. And so really, really challenging that is important. Not being a math person. I was told from an early age, and turns out I'm actually kind of good at math, but didn't know it, so.
Director Richter.
There we are. This is a little bit off the wall, but with the tweaks to the OEs that we made, I believe in the last board meeting, maybe on our consent agenda here, about how to make our district attractive and viable for parents. It's been a really long day and a hard day. So I apologize if this is not worded the best that I could. But honestly, how to sell what you're doing to the public and really market it, for lack of a better word, because there are amazing things going on. And I would love to take it out of some of the language that generates a lot of excitement here among educators and make it accessible to, you know, all those parents who now have children who have these opportunities in the future, and just emphasize how good we're doing. That's all. Thank you.
I did have a question to, or just to clarify. So we've done all this great work around instruction, sort of what's happening day to day in our classroom. But aside from grades, which I'm very glad that we have in R2, when we think about SBA and I think we look at PSAT data too, and FastBridge as well, which we look at all in R2. Those tests are still tied to sort of the standard nationwide progression, is that right? Of sort of expecting that students are going to be in Algebra 1 in 9th grade, and then and then Geometry in 10th grade, and so on down the line. So from a board perspective, what should we expect, or what should we be aware of as we start looking at this data coming in, you know, in R2 for these students who've been through these different pathways? Because I can tell you my 10th grader, you know, who accessed Algebra 1 in 7th grade, so Geometry in 8th grade, he walked out of the PSAT this fall and he was like, oh, before I take that again, I need to review geometry because it's been 2 years, versus, and this test kind of expecting that he was taking geometry concurrently. So do you think we could see some gaps opening up, or that, I mean, if we're doing the right thing by students, I don't care as much about the test, but just, can you speak to that a little bit? Do I have that understanding right, first of all?
Right.
And sort of what could the implications be, especially for board monitoring going forward as we're looking for these from these data sets?
I think I will need to think about that more, because I think, so I look at some of the different districts around us, and I just was looking at that education recovery scorecard and some scatter plots around where different districts are, and kind of looking at free and reduced lunch versus achievement. And in math specifically, like Bellevue's still significantly above the trend line, and they've had this pathway for a long time. So I was looking at that going, I wonder what that is. Like, I was in that system for a long time, but I think it's really hard to say, here's what the impact will be on SBA or on PSAT, or what those different pieces are. I think, like, I do want to understand, look at more where the trend data is and those lines are, and really be able to be thoughtful about that. I think it's interesting to think about, like, what is the satellite data we want to continue to look at, and then thinking about, like, a logic model of, you know, R2, OE10, OE11, OE14, what are the different data pieces by which we track our success? So I don't think it's an answer that I have yet.
And that's totally fine. And I want to be very clear that we should do right by our students first and figure out how we monitor that effectively, not the other way around, just to be very, very clear. It's just thinking about how do we monitor this? This is a really new system. And how do we make sure that the board's monitoring is keeping up and being effective?
Yeah, and I think that the interplay of those different pieces and with our strategic framework, because I think about, like, a student who's being tutored in math algorithms from age 5 on, how might they feel about math? How do they feel about achievement? How do they feel about themselves? Like, and I genuinely don't know, but I think, what is it that we want to foster and attend to in kind of the complexity of all of the OEs and Rs? Because, kind of earlier thinking about, like, math still needs accuracy and it also needs flexibility. So thinking about, like, with our students, we need achievement that we are showing by specific numbers, and we also need our students to be learners and connected to each other. So it's a complex answer that I don't have just yet. Any
other questions? Thank you,
Yeah.
Dr. Rose, for pulling all of this data and really being able to dive in. This is something I think I've wanted to do during every R2 monitoring, so it's nice to finally start seeing this and seeing the pieces coming together. All right, I will now entertain a motion to accept the progress monitoring report for R2 as presented.
So motioned.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Richter and seconded by Director Yocum to accept the progress monitoring report for R2 as presented. Is there any other further discussion? Just want to remind actually that our standard for progress monitoring is different from monitoring. So with monitoring, we talk about reasonable progress. With the progress monitoring reports, we have agreed to just accept them, which is a little bit different terminology, unless they're wildly off base, which they have not been yet. But it's a different standard because this is sort of an action that our board is doing or has decided is important, but is not part of the formal monitoring that goes into evaluating the performance of the district. Just for clarification. Any other discussion? Nope. Then all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the superintendent report. Dr. Holman.
Yeah, so tonight I have a brief update for the board. Just want to talk about the superintendent's community leaders breakfast. It was scheduled last year on the day of the bomb cyclone, and we just didn't get it rescheduled. So what we typically do is hold this in November in alignment with American Education Week. That didn't happen this year because we're in January, and but the theme we thought was really connected to our work as a district. The theme is Together for Safe, Just, and Equitable Schools. And last year we had a planned event really to highlight and celebrate our ongoing work related to inclusion. And we had that planned last year, and so many of those elements are getting brought back this year to the Community Leaders Breakfast. American Education Week is simply a week to celebrate public education and all of the people that are part of creating a public school system, and annually that is celebrated across the country. And so one of the ways we have celebrated is to hold a superintendent's breakfast during that week, and we're just a little bit delayed this year. And so this Wednesday we have community leaders, electeds, many of you, community organization leaders here in the district coming together just to celebrate and recognize this theme of Together for Safe, Just, and Equitable Schools, to highlight and celebrate our work related to inclusive schools, because we truly believe that inclusive schools where students experience a sense of belonging, where they're valued, where they're welcomed, where they feel safe, like those are all things that that lead to what we believe is better outcomes, better experiences, and actually leads to hopefully creating an experience where students leave our system future ready. And so it truly is just a time to celebrate. And we often talk about the gaps, and we talk about the work we're doing and need to do, and maybe not as often as we should actually celebrate, because public schools in America are different than schools anywhere across the globe. We educate every child in our community, and that is unique to our public school system. And so it is something to be, it's honorable to have a public school system like this. It's a right that kids in America have to be educated, and I think we do a great job of educating kids. And so to celebrate that work and to celebrate the work of us trying to do our craft better for kids in our community is really exciting. And so if you're able to come on Wednesday, we'll have a little breakfast that's donated by Sodexo, our partners here in the district. And we have students that are coming to perform. Dr. Hitch will be providing some comments. I'll provide some comments. And it's just a time of celebration. So just wanted to recognize that that's occurring, why it's occurring, and just recognize that we should probably celebrate a little bit more often as well. Thanks.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is school visits and community affairs. This portion of the business meeting of the board is an opportunity for any board members to inform and provide updates from school visits or from organizations or groups they engage with on behalf of LWSD. I think I will actually go first, talking about the school visit that Director Yoakum and Director Meekhoff and I, we had 2 school visits last Thursday. And the first was to Juanita Elementary, where we had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time in 5th grade math classrooms and seeing some of these concepts that we have been talking about tonight in practice. Really that focus on culturally responsive education. Maybe this is just me, but my initial understanding of it was that it was all about culture, because it's there in the name, and so I was very confused of like how does culture, like, are we talking about race and ethnicity in math class, like what is going on here? But really understanding. Thank you, Dr. Holman, for walking through the 6 components, because I was going to do that, but now I don't have to. But that there is one component that, yes, is focused on culture, which is really, I think, though I think of it more broadly now as not just sort of your cultural background, but really more of the context that you're growing up in, which certainly can be cultural background, but can be other things like ability and so on. But then there are other components as well, and really focusing, the focus at Juanita was really on that engagement component. And so in the classrooms, we saw students working on whiteboards in small groups, 2 or 3 students working through math problems together, lots of discourse, not a lot of the sort of teacher directed at the front in the time that we were in there. It was really the teachers moving around among the students and assisting them as needed, and the students talking to each other and just demonstrating a lot of great discourse. And we also got to pop into a kindergarten SEL lesson, talking about Kelso's choices and apologizing. I forget what the second one was, but some of how do students problem solve together, and how do they figure out how to work with one another to address issues that come up. And then we also popped into 1st grade whole group literacy instruction, so getting to see the students working on that, and again, the different ways that teachers were engaging students, still engagement being a priority, just in a very different setting and a different subject and so on. So yes, thank you to the team, as always, at Juanita Elementary for allowing us to awkwardly pop in and totally disrupt everything that's going on. We really appreciate it, because it's great to see all of that play out in practice. Yeah, and Director Yoakum, I think, is going to talk about Thoreau.
Yeah. So the 3 of us then, we then went to Thoreau to visit. And as Dr. Holman had mentioned, we were asked to read about that culturally responsive education before our visits. And the material we read really aligned with the work that is truly happening at Thoreau. Major focus, and add that as it has been discussed, a major focus of culturally responsive education and what Thoreau is working on is rigor and engagement. And really emphasizing that rigor isn't about difficulty or volume, but about the level and complexity of thinking students are asked to do. So teachers at Thoreau are intentionally creating conditions that encourage deep thinking, and we were able to see a lot of that. Before we visited the classrooms, we heard from fifth graders involved in the HOPS program, which is the Helping Our Peers Succeed. And they shared the benefits of this program and made sure to mention that it's important to support younger students at Thoreau because, quote, they are our future. Beautifully said from a fifth grader. These students also use the opportunity to advocate to district leadership for new turf. A new turf field, so Dr. Holman might be receiving a letter from them shortly. We were then able to visit a few classrooms, and one highlight for me was stepping into a kindergarten classroom full of students immersed in writing, and I believe the educator in this room was Dr. Rose's former student. Yeah, so that was kind of exciting to see as well. So well done with your student because this teacher was phenomenal. These students were talking, moving around, drawing, and laughing. And at first glance, it might look like they were not engaged, especially to those of us who grew up with very different expectations in school. But the classroom culture was built on the understanding that students don't need to sit still and silent to learn. And I noticed one student exclaim loudly, "No way, that's amazing." And I wasn't sure if it related to the writing lesson, so I kind of walked over there to take a look at what was so amazing. And another student had eagerly shared the beginning, middle, and end of his story that he was drawing about finding a spider in his bed right before going to sleep. Those students were sharing and learning from each other. It was incredible, and that one author is well on his way to writing horror stories in my mind. So thank you to the Thoreau staff and students for welcoming us into your school. These visits really do truly make me, and I believe all of us who attend as board directors, see the work that we discuss here really come to life. So thank you, everyone involved. I do have two other updates that aren't school visits, that are not committees, but the school visits, but not. Can I do that now if I'm here, or what was that?
Actually, I wanted to say one more thing too
Perfect,
about Thoreau,
go.
which while Director Yoakum was watching writing, I got to go into purposeful play in kindergarten, which I did not realize was a thing, and all the educators were like, yes, we've been doing this for quite a while. But it was students in sort of self-directed small groups, all these kindergartners. I was sitting mostly with some kids who were building a tree house with a water slide out of Legos. Very, very high engagement from every student in that room. And it was very cool to see that there, especially within the kindergarten day, that there's that flexibility and that our educators are taking advantage of that. And then, yes, you have community affairs as well, Director Yoakum?
Yes. Is that okay? Dr. Holman and I had an opportunity to speak at PTSA's special education group meeting last week. Dr. Holman presented information about our 2 levies on the February 10th ballot, and I followed up with a very high-level overview of how education is funded in our state, which I think everyone left glassy-eyed. And that's it.
Any other updates? School visits, community affairs. Next item on the agenda are board member committee updates. Do any board members have updates they would like to provide? Director Yoakum?
I have one. Last week I attended the first meeting of the revamped Inclusion Advisory Committee, and this group consists of community members, parents, students, gen ed educators, high cap educators, special ed educators, MTSS coaches, and district leaders. It was a robust group, a lot larger than what I recall from last year's advisory committee. We started off by discussing ableism and how this can be observable in subtle ways through systems and even through words. And this led to the introduction of the work which this group will do. It's to review the Students' Rights and Responsibilities Handbook. And if language is ableist, how might this show up throughout this handbook? There was discussion about how this handbook is sort of the floor for schools as they develop their own school handbooks. So hopefully revisions to this district handbook will lead to more consistency with practices and expectations across school handbooks. So looking forward to seeing the work of this committee progress.
Anyone else? I also attended Community Connectors last week, which is a great group of mostly community members, yes, and some city staff focused on just issues around safety and security. And that group continues to be very interested, concerned, curious about immigration enforcement, how that impacts schools, what our policies and procedures are around that. Sort of what are the stands that we should be taking, and so I appreciate the engagement there. Always a really thoughtful discussion, and really the commitment of that committee to keep pushing us to do the best that we can for our students, because we know that safety really underlies everything else. All of this great work that we're talking about today really starts with students feeling safe and supported at school, and so the commitment to making sure that that we're doing the right things by our students is very much appreciated. Any other committee updates?
I forgot, but we had a Kirkland coordination meeting since our last meeting. I thought we had reported on that already. And when my notes load, I will be able to tell you what happened. They're not loading.
I have my notes.
So I can just make it up.
I have some notes as well.
Okay, yes, got it. Okay. Well, big one is we discussed having trying to do an in-person meeting of the coordination meeting coming up. So I think there's some work going to be done around that. The district provided an update. You have notes, actual notes too, because I ended up not loading mine, so I'm just going off the dome here. The district, we provided updates on both our levy and our ongoing construction program. I believe there was discussion of, there's a city process underway to expand the number of students that we allowed at ICS. That is on track, with the council planning to take action. I believe it's a council action. I think it's in the spring. Anyway, it sounds like everything is on track, and that it would, if approved by the council, would be in place for the next academic year to expand the number of students allowed there. Director Yoakum, I'm going to ping pong to you.
Yeah, I started off with Kirkland giving an update, and I think I have more notes from that, so thank you for starting with our update. They asked questions about the sales tax increase and how they can support schools in their legislative group when they're talking with legislators about that. Talked about, I think, city manager talked about their website. Was it snowplow maps, if I'm correct? Okay.
They make their own brine now, we learned. Is that right?
What was that?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's pretty
right.
That's exciting.
They make their own brine. Yeah.
Yeah.
An update on the Kraken facility, I believe. Sorry. I was not prepared for this update. I'm sorry.
I was, so I'm
and also a Arizona housing trip that a few of the council members went on, and down, was it that, Dr. Holman, do you remember this?
I do. It was in the vein of affordable housing, and we've been talking about with Kirkland City Council just what are the options and opportunities. What we didn't bring into that space was some data that we collected. Both agencies, City of Kirkland and Lake Washington, did a staff survey, and so we'll need to bring that to our next meeting just to review, like, what did our staff tell us about affordable housing. And so City of Kirkland, I think 2 council members went down to Arizona, maybe it was just one, went down to Arizona to see some models, and one of the models was a city purchased land from the local school district and built some affordable housing for, I think, public employees. And just, it sounds like that was going well and that it was positively received. And so I received the contact information for the superintendent during that meeting. And so I will more than likely reach out just to understand what that was like what was the school district's role, just to continue that conversation, because we have both City of Kirkland, well, all of our cities and the school district have an interest in having more affordable options, because having staff live closer to work is beneficial for many or some. I think we got there.
All right. The board plans to meet next on February 9th, 2026 with a 5 p.m. study session and a 7 p.m. board meeting. Dr. Holman.
The board is meeting January 31st for a study session, 8 to noon as well.
That as well, yes. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the January 26th, 2026 board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director La Liberty and seconded by Director Yocum that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, hearing none, motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at 9:29 p.m.